Amy Poehler supposedly is coming up with a church show, but I'm thinking it'll be hilarious, but really? Anyway,
yeah.
I can't do my church show, though. It's impossible.
Okay, then I'm gonna request on camera permission to assume the rights to church and try to figure out how to produce something.
If I could, though, be the person who says previously on church.
Absolutely.
That's all I want.
Right, I remember.
That's all I want.
One of the very first times that we were in a physical location together and you told me the story.
Yeah.
That's what you lead with.
Because I have stories.
I know you do.
Oh my gosh, do I have stories.
Welcome back to Between Two Ficuses, plants. Between Two Plants. I'm your host, Landon Whitsitt, and with me is my good friend. Okay, so if you were a tree, Jan, if you were a plant,
if I were a ficus,
that we were between, what kind of plants would you be that we were between?
I was going to say the hibiscus.
Whoa.
A pop of color.
Yeah.
You know.
And fun to say.
Fun to say. Absolutely. Hibiscuses is really hard to say.
Welcome to Between Two Hibiscuses.
That's right.
We're ridiculous.
I'm a big fan of the rhododendron also, but that's like a Monterey thing.
You like plants that are just a party in your mouth.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Why pick daisy when you can pick rhododendron?
Right.
Yeah.
Rose. What is that? Okay. Let's talk about the 21st century church. I mean, as a topic, it is almost passé.
Yeah.
Except that in our church, don't you find, because you and I get called to talk about these things a lot.
Yes, we do.
Are you constantly amazed at how folks? I mean, this is new stuff for a lot of people, and they're so very grateful that we're sharing it with them.
Yes. Yes. I've had a little road show for almost 10 years. That gets tweaked for every time I do it, but it's essentially the same.
Yeah.
And I've shared it even with seminarians, and at the end say or ask them, so this is all old news for you, because please say that this was old for you. And everybody says they've never heard it before. And I thought, how can you be in seminary and not know this?
Yeah.
But that's just me. I think that we don't know what we don't know, so we don't even know it could be different.
Yeah. So when we talk about the 21st century church, we're not just talking about the ruling and teaching elders of the presbytery.
Right.
We're talking about the fact that the ruling and teaching elders of the presbytery, and those who primarily are serving on our CPMs or our COMs, really have a responsibility to our candidates to make sure they know about this, because what you're finding is that a lot of them don't.
Right.
That is shocking to me.
It is. And I don't want to be generalizing, but I think that, I really have found that. And part of it is seminary has so much information they're trying to convey. It's like general college for Christianity.
Okay.
There's so much stuff. And I remember in seminary, I was sort of allergic to the practical ministry classes, thinking, really, I'm going to have to take a preaching class because I don't preach like you, I can already tell. Or, I feel like I'm an on-the-job learner. But there are certain things that would be good to talk about ahead of time.
Yeah.
Especially because it's not just what we're coming in with, but let's say that you have a clerk of session who's been the clerk of session for 15 years.
Right.
And might even complain about being the clerk of session for 15 years, but doesn't want to give that up and doesn't know a different way of being the clerk.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's a bad example maybe, because there aren't that many ways of being the clerk.
Right.
But there are lots of ways of being the person who oversees education or oversees stewardship. Or we've institutionalized things to the point that we have many, many things in our churches that we always done, let's say, that don't impact anybody anymore. And maybe the only person in the church that loves doing it is the lady who's in charge of it. And it's soul-sucking. People don't want to volunteer for it. I see examples of that all the time. Somebody will throw a chili dinner for the first time. The deacons threw a chili dinner, let's say. And people will say, oh, that was so much fun. Let's do that every year. Well, no, we don't have to do that every year. It's really okay.
Yeah.
This was really fun. If we did it next year, it may not be as fun.
I get very nervous when people say the first annual.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, really?
No.
The only thing I'm willing to say the first annual about anything was my marriage. Right? That's
Right,
it.
exactly.
Our first annual anniversary.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with you.
So when you talk to us, when I've heard you talk about this, you ask us to imagine the church building,
Yes.
and you try to paint this picture of an
Sure.
environment.
Sure.
Would you be Bob Ross and paint that picture for us now?
Of course.
Another reference. Only a few will get.
I took our church staff when I was a pastor in Virginia. I took them to Wegmans. You know Wegmans grocery
Yeah.
store? It's fabulous. They sell everything from off-brand cereal to Italian pottery, and they have places where you can eat. They've got olive bars, and you could get married there, and there's a special room with a chandelier, and they've got a little movie theater. But we had staff meeting there, and we went to the prepared food bar or whatever, and we're sitting there, and that's where we had staff meeting. And I said, so how is this grocery store different from the grocery stores of your childhood? Well, completely different, no matter how old you were. So the 50-year-old, would say, yeah, our A&P was nothing like this. Right. Even the 30-year-old would say, yeah, this is like a circus of groceries. It's just amazing. But so think about what is the kitchen that you use now at your home like the kitchen that your grandmother had? Probably different.
Yeah.
Or your parents even. And so think about how is the church building the way it was when you were a child or at your grandparents' church? Pretty much the same. It really is pretty much the same. Now there are exceptions, of course, but we have pews that are screwed into the floor. Yeah. We have kitchens. Actually, our institutional kitchens in our churches might be really dated, but we do things the same way we've always done it. I'm not saying I'm against pews or anything like that, but we our building. It continues to be familiar, and a lot of people love that because I remember a friend who told me that everything in her life is changing. She was in her 90s. She said in her condo elevator, everybody's speaking different languages. She turns on the television, and things are on television she never imagined would ever really be on television. She reads the newspaper, and it feels like everything is falling apart. The world is just total chaos. So I want to walk into church, she says, sit in my same pew, sing familiar hymns, pray familiar prayers, hear a comforting message, and go home. And that is what the church is for an awful lot of us. But it can't be like that anymore because that's not what God asks of us anymore. It was a completely different culture that built those kinds of sanctuaries. Yeah. I was just reading that with the invention of the movable printing press, that's when sanctuaries started getting bigger and bigger because people started wanting an informed sermon on the things they were reading at home because they finally had Bibles. So more and more people were coming to worship. And now we have a lot of churches with massive sanctuaries for 300 people, and there are only 35 people in there. So what do you do about that? And it doesn't mean the church is not thriving. It just means that the space doesn't fit who they are now.
Yeah. But before we take off down this road of exploring the 21st century church and what could conceivably be an uncomfortable road for a lot of people.
Sure.
Can we take a moment to just address where do we find the peace and comfort? Because that is going to be uncomfortable, and yes, I think necessarily and appropriately so. What do churches, as they move down that road, need to be attentive to and do about the very real reality that for a lot of people, especially in, I know in the area of Kansas City that I live, it's an ex-urban community, so people don't work where they live. They come home, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're rushing to get kids to the soccer practice. I mean, I've got 4 children. This is my life every single day of the week. We want some peace. We want some rest. We want some Sabbath. We want some downtime.
Right.
What does the church need to be attentive to as it marches down the 21st century road? How does it need to be attentive to those historic, traditional, what we've always done functions about that? What's a way that they can still do some of those, or can they? I guess that's a first level question.
Sure, I think they can, but I think we should be willing to give up some things. We can't have everything we've ever wanted.
Okay.
We have to give up some things for the sake of people who are not yet with us, for whom A Mighty Fortress is not their favorite hymn because they've never really heard that hymn.
Well, I don't want them in our church anyway.
Well, see?
I mean, they clearly don't.
See? Exactly. So, okay, an example. Yeah. I went to an evangelism conference or a new church development. I can't remember. It was down in Florida, and I was part of the leadership team. So there are people from all over the country. Some of the ruling elders have paid their own way.
Wow.
So during a break, I'm talking with a guy. He's paid his own way to come from Texas. And I said, so tell me about your new church. And he said, we meet in a school. It really doesn't do anything for me. I kind of hate that we're in a school because we have to set up all the tables and chairs every week, and it's a pain. I said, oh, okay. Well, so how's your worship? Like, what's your worship like? I'm not a big fan of the worship. It's, it's really loud, and I'm kind of a traditional guy. And anyway, everything I ask him, he tells me this doesn't really do it for him. So I said, okay, so let me get this straight. So you have flown here from Texas, and you paid your own way to come to this event because you want to learn more about this church that you're not so crazy about. So why are you part of that church? And he said, his whole face lit up, and he said, I would give up all the things I love to see those hundreds of 20 and 30-somethings coming through the door every Sunday.
Wow.
So that's awesome. However, he also needs to be fed himself, because he's going to be burnt out if he is given up everything that means something to him in terms of spiritual practices. So I think, again, think about going to Starbucks, and I forgot how many choices there are for drinks. We should just offer lots of choices, and I don't mean offer everything for everybody. Right. I'm saying, and again, it totally depends on the context. What I would do for my church, let's say, is not what you would do for your church. But to be aware that we need some features of our community that are going to feed people who are used to being in church, and they do know every word to A Mighty Fortress. Right. But also something that will feed people who have never been part of a church. Yeah. And that is relationship, I think. Yeah. People are longing for authentic relationship. And, it really does depend on the individual. My kids are 20-somethings, and they all prefer traditional worship. Mm-hmm. They love a pipe organ. They really are more into something that's traditional because they grew up in the church and that's who they are. But they also, more than anything, want authentic relationships. Yeah. Because if they go to a big church and the organ is fabulous and the music and the worship are great, but nobody cares about them, they're not going to stick around. Yeah. But and the same is true, I think, if you love your people and if the community loves each other, we'll put up with an awful lot of things. We might even put up with drums, or we might even put up with having worship in a space that's not a traditional sanctuary. Yeah. A lot of it really depends. I preached at a church this past Sunday that had 3 different worship services with 3 completely different congregations. The last worship service is filled with kids. Middle school kids, high school kids, their parents, and quite a few older people who are not related to any of these people by blood.
Oh, adoptive grandparents.
Yeah, but they really want to be in there. They want to see the kids. They want to know those kids. They want to have a relationship with them. And so I don't know that the music that the kids are playing, the kids are doing all the music, is rocking their world. However, they're willing to give that up, and they're going to find their whatever the worship music is that they love someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those relationships, this is a place where I always try to tell smaller churches, particularly churches that may not be in the sexy urban core, that they really have a shot at providing exactly what the folks of the 21st century want. Because smaller churches can outdo people in relationship better than anybody else. I mean, that's their bread and butter. That's what they can do. My 6-year-old will regularly go sit with the 92-year-old widower. Right. He wants to go see Norm every Sunday, and so he will sit with Norm during worship service.
That's right.
Because of that relationship, and that will form form his faith. Okay, so relationships as we move down, which is huge, and it's not antithetical to this 21st century road that we'll walk down.
Especially authentic relationships are in demand. Yeah. No matter who it's with. I talk with a lot of my kids' friends who say that their church are their friends. Their friends, that's who they go to, that's who they trust in. And I think that's great. I get that to a point. I think what is scary to me are those existential moments where the friends aren't cutting it, that there's something that you are going through that nobody really understands. Right. And that's where a spiritual community, I think, is really helpful. Because even if you're with other people in a spiritual community that don't understand, there's an intentional desire to hold you up and support you in a way that's hard to find without church, in my opinion.
Yeah. So we've looked at our church, and we've seen that the church that we have is really the church from a while back. It's not been updated the way that our kitchen has been, the way that our grocery stores have been. One metaphor that you like to use, one story that you like to bring out to help us understand that is you share with us what Phyllis Tickle has said about the church rummage sale every 500 years. Right. where we put out all the things in the rummage sale and we try to figure out what we want to keep and what we want to do away with.
Yeah, we might keep the gorgeous stone baptismal font that got put in the basement because somebody donated a sleeker one that matches the pews better. We might want to get rid of the Strawberry Festival. We've been doing it for a long, long time. Everybody hates the Strawberry Festival, but we've just been doing it, but it's really okay. We can just give it up now. Think about purgatory. I mean, the Catholics got rid of purgatory. It just got rid of it. I don't know what happened to those people.
It's in purgatory.
Yeah, are they? Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I mean, and not be afraid to do that. I think, and this is kind of scary, and understand my language, we're often more afraid of our congregation than we are of God. Think about it. I mean, think who has power in your church. It's often not the pastor. It's often not the leader, the ruling elder, but it could be the older lady who gives a lot of money and often threatens, if you don't, keep the Strawberry Festival, I'm going to take my money away. Yeah.
I think a comforting thing, and this is what Phyllis Tickle's trying to help us understand. One of the comforting things is that it's this is not an unusual thing that's happening to us. It may feel because we've never experienced it before, but she says this happens roughly every 500 years.
And in the Jewish faith, in Islam, it happens in every faith. About every 500 years, there is a tumultuous shift, and it clearly doesn't happen in one day. We don't wake up one morning and everything's different. It's a slow shift, and it's about 500 years. So think about 500 years ago, we are making this film on Reformation Sunday. It was Reformation. 500 years before that was, I think, the splitting, I don't have my notes in front of me, but the splitting between the Eastern and Western churches.
Right.
Yeah. About 500 years before that would have been the fall of Jerusalem. About 500 years before that would have been the birth of Jesus. About 500 years before that would have been the exile, I think. About 500 years before that would have been King David, or the start of Kings for Israel. And again, that's just ballpark. But it's really important to remember that that this is a normal thing, and this is a good thing.
Yeah.
But it is. We forget that that Sunday school and pews and hymn books, a lot of those things have not always been with the church. But we think that you can't be a church without those things, but those are all relatively new in the big picture of Christianity.
What are the new things then for us? If hymn books and pews and all that, what is defining? Because the printing press really kind of did its thing on the church.
Right.
What's the thing that's doing the thing on the church now?
Obviously, it's digical connections. I mean, social
media. You
media.
like being able to do between two ficuses?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, just think about how, I don't know, most people in churches now get their information from their church, newsletters or whatever, digitally.
Right.
The trick is that most of the people in our churches are, at best, digital immigrants, or they're just not really interested. I hesitate to throw out ages on that, because I know a lot of people in their 80s and 90s who have computers, and I don't know if they have Twitter accounts, but they certainly share pictures on Facebook of their grandchildren or whatever. Right. And so that's changed everything in terms of prayer concerns, in terms of information. The call of a new pastor of a prominent church. I had a bet with the head of the search committee how long that was going to take. I won't mention the church, but how long that was going to take to get that word out. And because they did not share the candidate until right before the person was introduced. And it was 5 seconds. It was 5 seconds from the time that person's name was mentioned. It was out there in 5 seconds. Yeah. And so, because the fear was that this person's current church would find out before she told them, that she was going to a different call.
Right.
So it's a completely different world. If you're searching for a new pastor, and certainly if you're a church and you're looking for, or you're looking for a new pastor, or a pastor's looking for a new church, you're going to Google those people. You're going to look at their Facebook account, and you're maybe going to friend them on Facebook so that you can see what all they're doing and see their pictures. And that's a completely different way of being the church. And that is a really scary thing for pastors these days. Just a little insert here. There was a nasty letter to the editor written about a certain pastor that was filled with all sorts of information that wasn't true, but it cost him a couple of calls, because they we decided to go with someone else because we read about this and we just didn't want any drama.
Oh my.
Yeah, so we've got to be really careful.
And this is something that I've that you taught me a couple of years ago. I think it was Reggie McNeil, Missional Renaissance. Is that the name of the book?
Yep.
And the two different scorecards that we use.
Yeah.
That we have historically. We've historically kept score about how well we're doing, using the criteria of how much, how often, and how many. Yep. Right. Or the way you've sometimes talked about the ABCs, the attendance, the building, and the cash. Right. Talk to us about those different scorecards and the way that we should shift our brain into thinking: are we actually being the church God is calling us to be?
You can tell in a session meeting if most of the conversation is about attendance, building, and cash, and by the building I mean maintenance issues, that kind of thing, and how much money we don't have. I've been to churches where the entire session meeting was about the building. There was an opening prayer, there was a closing prayer, but we're only talking about the building, as if we didn't have a building, we'd had nothing to talk about. And instead, thriving churches for the 21st century are talking about, and forgive me because this is storky, but like the NOPs, if we're going to talk about building blocks. So the neighbors, who are the neighbors? Do we even know who the neighbors are? How we're organized as a church. Do we really have to have our session members be the liaisons or the chairs of different committees? Really, is that still a good idea? And the hugest one is a paradigm shift, because the paradigm that we have lived with and loved for so long just doesn't work anymore. A pastor who holds office hours, let's say between 9 and 5, and if you need something, that pastor's going to be in there. And my hope would be that most pastors are not spending time in their offices very much. They could have office hours, I suppose, but you got to get out in the world, and that's really it. So the neighbors, a lot of churches don't even know who their neighbors are. They think they do. Right. But I remember years ago for World Communion Sunday, in fact, we had quite a few African American and African members who joined. And one woman afterwards came up to me and said, "Who are these people? Like, where do they live? I've never seen these people walking around." All of the people that joined the church literally lived within walking distance of that church building, when actually the people whose names were already on the rolls tended to live farther away and were unaware of how the neighborhood had changed. Right. The organization is huge. I think we should give ourselves permission to play with the organization of who does what, because we're so used to the way it's been, we think it's in the Book of Order or something, or we think it's in the Bible even.
I thought it was on the stone tablets.
Exactly.
That God gave the people.
Yeah, that you've got to have this person, and you've got to have this person. You have to have a chair of Christian education, and you've got to have a chair of stewardship. And there are really a lot of different ways that you can organize a church to make it work better for your particular context.
What are some of the fun, helpful organizational styles, methods, models that you've come across that you thought, ooh, that would be a good one to keep and test out to see if that works for us?
I know that a lot of nominating committees in churches have a hard time recruiting people to be officers because they feel like this is going to be like a second job for me. Yeah. I'm going to have to be the head of building and grounds and be responsible for the roof. And nobody wants to do that. And we had a phenomenon where somebody would serve, let's say, 6 years as a ruling elder and be so burned out they left the church.
Yes,
so burned out.
I've seen it.
So what if the people who are called to be elders, and it doesn't have to be a huge group of people, let's say it's 6 people, 9 people, they are the spiritual leaders of the church, and they are not allowed.
What? Whoa, what?
I know.
Crazy talk.
Pretty crazy.
All right,
They're not allowed to run anything.
Oh.
They can't lead PW. They can't chair the stewardship committee. They certainly can't run the building. They can't be in charge of anything. Their job is to monthly talk about how their church is transforming. What have they witnessed that was transformational in the last month? Using that time so the pastor can equip those leaders to pray with their people, to maybe lead a Bible study, to maybe lead a Bible study that's not in the building, like we're going to have a Bible study at Starbucks or at a bar or someplace else, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not the only minister. That's a huge piece, because a lot of people see the person who went to seminary as the professional Christian, who is the lone minister, and nothing can happen without that person. So changing that culture in terms of, do we have to have a pastor who attends every committee meeting? So many times I'll hear leaders come and talk with me because they're very upset. Their church is going down the tubes, they say, and it's their pastor's fault. Because our previous pastor went to every single meeting, and he taught every single adult class, and he was at every single social event. Well, to me, that pastor who does all those things is not equipping the church to, we're supposed to be the priesthood of all believers, so we're supposed to be equipping other people to be priests and leaders. And there are some pastors who don't want to relinquish that, but most pastors would be happy to relinquish that. My job is to work myself out of a job. Mm-hmm. If I could teach you to do pastoral care, if I could teach you to pray with people after worship, so I'm greeting people over here, but you're praying with somebody who wants private confidential prayer over there, the church is better served. And it empowers people to be able to carry on their ministry wherever they are. If they're teachers or they're plumbers or they're office managers, doctors, wherever they are, that they now are better equipped to be ministers out in the world. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have this dream that nominating committees will have a hard time getting someone to serve on session because the people don't want to give up the ministries, the missions that they are a part of. They don't want to give that up in order to be on this boring 6-person prayer committee, right? They really are so engaged in the work that they believe God has called them to do.
Yeah, I love that.
That nominating committees are frustrated because they can't get anybody to be the spiritual leaders.
Or it's easy getting people to be the spiritual leaders because they don't have to be in charge. They know now if it's like my safeguard. I don't have to be in charge of stewardship because I'm an elder right now. So I'm free for 3 years. But you're doing the work. I think people don't join churches to join committees. They join because they want spiritual depth and nourishment. And this is going to be like a special group that is learning how to do that better. Mm-hmm. And that's really appealing, I think, to people.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about focusing on our paradigm shift,
right?
Give us some contrasts about where we are now to, because a lot of people say the church is broken, and I say no, the church is not broken. The church works perfectly well for the people who are in it.
Right.
I mean, stealing from the great leadership, Heifetz, and the church is not broken. But the problem is, back to the neighbors, the church is just not set up for the neighbors.
It's obsolete.
So obsolete's a good word. So what are some basic ways that we can keep that fresh in our brain about shifting from one paradigm to another?
Well, I mean, it's just, there are churches that do mission, and there are churches that are missional. So there are churches that they say, we go to church. And you can still say that, that's okay.
Right.
But there are churches that are the church, that we are the church in Starbucks, we are the church in our classrooms, we are the church wherever we are. If there are 3 people from the same church meeting for lunch in a diner and just having conversation, that we are the church out there. The church is not just within the walls, and that it's here. Like it's not about membership. The old American Express commercials about membership has its benefits. So if I'm a member, I can have my daughter can get married here for free, and my kids can get baptized here, and my funeral can be from here. I remember a lady I met who joined the church because she said, I'm going to need a place for my funeral. That's why she joined. And membership is completely different from discipleship. So she's thinking she is going to get benefits from being on the rolls of this church, when actually being a part of a community is not about the membership, it's about discipleship. So it's about being equipped to go out and serve other people. So this is a tired example perhaps, but it's like the difference between wearing a bib and wearing an apron. There are certain points in our life that we need to wear a bib. When you're a baby, maybe when you're an older person, when you're eating lobster, for example.
Good point, yes.
But the world needs a lot of people wearing aprons, getting out there and helping in some way. And it's not even physical labor necessarily, although some people really love that. It's just being aware, being intentional when you see somebody who needs help. Trying to figure out what it is that you are being moved to address. If it's tutoring in your local school, or you're upset about gun violence, or you've just got a neighbor who is in a wheelchair and you go get groceries for that person. So it's not about taking care of me, it's about me reaching out, me being fed to the point that I am energized to go out and take care of other people and be aware of whatever God might be leading me to do and be.
Yeah.
So there's that. I'm just trying to think of some other ones. Like being concerned about the members of the church more than people outside the walls of the church. Like, why does this church exist? Does it exist primarily for the people who are here on Sunday mornings, or does it exist for the community?
That was the conversation I always had.
Yeah. And so usually there's a little bit of both, but one is going to be dominant.
Yeah.
And so which one is dominant? And I would say that for most of our churches, caring about the people inside the walls is, and that's regardless of generation too. I was talking with some young adults, 20-somethings who are part of a church, and they said, we work really hard. We're really tired from being in school, and now we're in our first jobs. We work really hard, so we really need a place where we don't have to take care of anybody. And that may be true, but hopefully you can get that spiritual nurturing that you can then go out and reach out to people.
Right.
The most important hour of the week shifts, and a paradigm shift from maybe being Sunday morning to being some other time. The church that we started in Virginia, and it's not even in existence anymore for lots of reasons, but on Monday night, people met for half-price burgers at a sports bar, and it was just to meet for burgers. It was a really easy way to say to a coworker, I'm meeting some friends for burgers, you want to come? And they're half-price, so there you go. The one spiritual-ish thing that we did was that we always tipped for the real price of the burger as sort of a social justice thing, because these are our wait staff that deserve to be paid well. That was the one justice-oriented thing we did. Tuesday night, there were small groups. Wednesday night, it was a Bible study. Thursday night was movie night, so somebody would pick a movie, and you'd go and see the movie, go see 12 Years a Slave, and then go talk about it over a beer afterwards. Friday night was game night for people who didn't have dates. They'd meet at somebody's condo and do it. Saturday, because it was a 20-something congregation and everybody was always moving, they would move somebody, like from this house to this house, or this apartment to that group home, or whatever. And then Sunday night was worship. So there were so many portals for getting in that if you interviewed the people who were part of that community, they might say that Sunday night was the most important hour of the week, but it also could be Monday night, or it could have been Wednesday night, or Saturday morning. They're moving people who don't even know them. I have a neighbor who needs to move. Can we just go help her? They have their own dollies. So that is a really amazing witness to a person who we can move somebody in 2 hours with 12 people and a couple of dollies. So it's a really different way of being the church.
Yes.
And all of those situations, we were being the church, and we were the church.
Yes. And that reminds me of where we started with, how do we find that place of rest and Sabbath? And you had talked about multiple things going on. I one time learned about a church who had decided to start a worship service and basically a second community for people in the restaurant industry who get off at 1 or 2 in the morning. So they were having worship at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, I'm a night owl, so that works for me. That may not, but it would not be about me. I could go to my normal Sunday morning worship service or whatever, and then we could, as our gift to this community, provide a space for folks who just plain. I had so many people who on their random days off on a Sunday would visit our congregation and would say, I'd love to be a member, but I have to work on Sunday mornings.
That's right. That's right.
I remember being in college and having to work on the Sunday morning. So where is the community for me at that time?
That's right.
So I think there's a way that we can maybe not have the best of both worlds, but in a way have the best of both worlds. That man that you met at that conference, that's a magnificent gift he's giving. I hope he's got that other piece that also fills him in.
And another point that's related to that is that what feeds me may not feed you, and it's really okay if we're not the same.
Yes,
it used to be, at least there was a sense that we are all on the same journey, because the world was more homogenous. I mean, I think that for example, there was somebody in the evening service at the church I used to serve who wanted to be baptized in the Potomac River, which is kind of disgusting, but that's what she wanted. And there were people at the 11 o'clock church who were very upset about that, and not about the pollution factor. They were upset that we have this beautiful sanctuary with a communion, or rather a baptismal font, and why that just was an affront to them that she would not want to be baptized there. They took that personally because this means so much to me. Why is she slapping us in the face by being baptized in a river? And just trying to lovingly explain that for you, this is it. This is really holy and important, but this this is not where she worships, and she likes the imagery of coming out of the water. And she could do it at a swimming pool also, but we didn't know anybody with a swimming pool. So I think that that's part of it too, is being open to people where it doesn't all have to be the same, and to appreciate that people practice their faith in different ways.
Yeah, that's good and helpful. And it feels like we're ending up in the same place where we ended up when we were talking about calling a pastor. There has to be an honesty about who we are, and a willingness. The piece that I like about this is the emphasis on neighbors. Our neighbors. Who are our neighbors? And it seems almost, well, it seems worn to keep saying it, but we are not an institution. We're not really a corporation.
Right.
We're a body. We're a group of people.
Right.
We're friends.
Yes.
And if I interacted with my friends as if I was a corporation unto myself, I wouldn't have a whole lot of friends.
That's true.
And so we, as the friends of the church, want to have more friends, and we want to help our friends and do what our friends need. So, I think of all that you've said, the emphasis on knowing who our neighbors is probably the most important and the most helpful piece to me. Thanks so much.
Hey, you're welcome.
This was fun.
I've enjoyed being between two ficuses with you. Thank you so much.
Join us next time when we'll have Martin Luther King. Right? It's what? Reformation?
Wrong one.
Oh, dang it.
No.
Oh, wouldn't have been. Boy. Okay, we'll see you next time.